Okay, so thank you for coming to the last session of the day. This is, there will be two presentations that we put together just because we are both part of the Government of Canada, and as many governments are doing internationally, we have open data initiatives and open information initiatives. Also, some words that are popular in our government these days are innovation and experimentation. Again, I expect that's probably a common theme for other people as well. So we thought we would both present what that means in our particular organizations. So, and I'm Sheila Carey from Canadian Heritage Information Network, as it says up there. Oh, how's that look? Okay. Just, that's the structure that my presentation will take. So to begin with, for those of you not familiar with the Canadian Heritage Information Network, we are a government within the Department of Canadian Heritage in the Government of Canada. We have existed since 1972, and those are our three main pillars of activity. On the left-hand side is our research, particularly in standards development, digital preservation, online audiences, and open data. Open data is a more recent area of research. And that research is disseminated in workshops and online. Our content is now on the Government of Canada main site. A lot of information on standards and choosing collections information system is there. And finally, reference and data sharing tools, including our national inventory and other databases such as the Parks Canada descriptive dictionaries. And Artists Canada as well. So to talk a little bit about Artefacts Canada, it is a national repository. It currently has in the Humanities database 4.3 million records from over 500 museums and galleries across Canada. Information used to be contributed way back when this started in the 70s by paper records that museums sent into CHIN, and they were put in a centralized database. This, like many collections management systems, was definitely started as a tool for researchers in museums. The information was never envisioned back then as being public access information. It was open only to museums that were part of the CHIN network. And then in 1998, Artefacts Canada was put online and hasn't changed much since then. Museums still send batch updates to Artefacts Canada. They're mapped to the Artefacts Canada data dictionary. There is the very old interface for the Humanities database for Artefacts Canada. It hasn't changed much since 1998. We had originally 3 databases. There was also an archaeological sites database, and there is still a national natural sciences database, but not much has happened to that one, and the Artifacts sites database was taken down in the late 1990s. As you can see, it's a data interface. And that is what you get if you go to a record currently. There's not much more to do than look at very basic information and then a link to a museum's website if they have it, and their social media, which were just 2 things we added in the last year or so. There are a lot of problems with the way that we get data and also the way that it is displayed. As I said, this is a data structure that goes back decades, and it's a flat data structure. So you lose a lot of the richness that is actually in museum information if they have relational information. There is bilingual data, but it's handled inconsistently across museums. Some institutions put both English and French in the same fields with different separators. There's a mixture of data because we have sometimes information about a digital object in the same record as the information about the object itself, and it's not really always clear. Wide variety of institutions, because we're talking about 500 different institutions across the gamut of collection types. They're all using their own standards. Mapping quality problems. There are issues that museums face when they map from their collections management fields to our Artefacts Canada fields. Rich museum information is getting dumbed down to fit in our fields. So generally, a lot of data quality problems. And also, we used to give a lot of help to museums when they were mapping their information to Artefacts Canada. As our resources got fewer and fewer, we've done less and less of that. So a new vision for Artefacts Canada is to move away from this central repository model, eventually to a model where at least some of these museums would maintain and publish their own linked open data. Museums would continue to be able to be free to use their own preferred metadata standard and vocabulary standards, but some of the inconsistencies that we know are in the data, some of them we can use rules, mapping rules to help with, and that was something that we have been testing out. Our core ontology, which is a formal system of naming your entities and types and their relationships. Just to be clear, when I'm talking about linked open data, we're talking about breaking up what are now collection records into a series of statements that are in triple format. So the CIDOC conceptual reference model is the core ontology that we're using. This work will provide some real benefits for the data producers because, as I mentioned, that some of the mapping work will be able to take out some of the work that they had to do to try to fit their data structure into our outdated Artefacts Canada model. We'll be able to provide them new ways to search across collections and eventually provide infrastructure so that they'll be able to create access to a search and put it on their own website. We can do this for provincial museum associations as well. That is not just because of linked open data, but that's because of the whole model that we're changing. So we decided to, before jumping right into using linked open data for Artefacts Canada, we wanted to first try a small test to test working with the technology, understand what that would mean, and also understand the benefits that we hoped would be there. I have to say that starting out the conference and hearing a presentation at Ignite about how terrible linked open data was perhaps not the best start to the conference, knowing that I was finishing talking about our project. But I will say that I agree that it is challenging and it isn't easy, but eventually I'm hoping the benefits will pay off, and that was one of the things we were looking at testing. Okay, so one of the things in linked data and Artefacts Canada, one of the benefits that we wanted to do was explore how we can connect the data that's not just in Artefacts Canada and those collections records across Canada, but how we can connect that out to other organizations that have created linked open data, including some of the standards like the Getty vocabularies, VF we're also connecting to, and then connect to data that is also out there produced by other organizations using LOD. And one of the real benefits that we see down the road is there is starting to be some interest in Canadian organizations, the libraries and archives, for example, in producing linked open data, and we see this benefit that we've been talking about since the 1990s in Canada about we should be able to connect our library, archival, and museum information because that will enrich all of the information, and so we're hoping that this will be a step towards that. Okay, the steps to implementing the vision. First of all, transforming what we do. The first thing that we needed to do was look at the data model, and so that was a step in mapping our old Artefacts Canada data model to the CIDOC conceptual reference model, transforming how we collect and manage the information For this project, it wasn't much of a transformation because to make it easy for the museums who participated, we basically said, if your data in Artefacts Canada isn't up to date and you're going to send us new information, just give it to us in whatever format you have. So most of them we got in an Excel spreadsheet, and then we did the work of mapping that directly to the CIDOC CRM, which meant we bypassed the step of mapping to the Artefacts Canada data dictionary. And I know in usability on websites, you talk about pain points and areas where you lose people. And I discovered when I had to try to do the mapping of some other data to the Artefacts Canada data dictionary, I understood the pain points that the museums have with that. So that was a bit of a learning process too. Enriching the resource descriptions was basically about looking for additional information we could link to. In our case, we used artist biographies, so we created references for artist biographies, so that if you went in and did a search for Emily Carr, for example, you can go and look at her bio, and then you can see what works there are by Emily Carr, what organizations hold her information, what archival organizations in Canada have information on Emily Carr as well. Visualizing the resources is about creating some different access points, and I took out a lot of the slides that actually showed images of what the application looks like, so I apologize for that because now I realize that I'm talking heavily about process. And eventually providing a framework for enhancement, that is all about looking for ways to improve the data, like if we can add on crowdsourcing and that sort of thing eventually. I don't know if there are any geeky people interested in ontologies, but that's just an example of the ontologies we used. So the main one is, our core one is the CIDOC conceptual reference model, but we also have ones for artists and institutions and the other entities we needed to map. This model is one of the things that we were testing, but we'll re-examine all of this as we go further to figure out which things we need to improve on. I also want to state this, because we were really focused on testing the technology, we didn't have a designer for this application, so don't go in and judge it on design and usability. But we really wanted to explore the different ways you could get into the data. So for this project, you can go in by institution and then, explore by institution, artists, artist groups. I should also say the 150 years of Canadian art, 2017 is Canada's 150th anniversary, so we chose that to be a focus for the project, but anyone working in art copyright will understand that when you get into the more recent artists, because we wanted images, we're weaker on the later part of the 150 years for Canadian art. And it's also not intended to be encyclopedic. It was just to get an idea of what we could do by focusing on a topic like this. Probably illegible slide, but it just gives you an idea of how you can work through the data. The main point of this is that there isn't a structured narrative that you would go through. So if somebody came in and they ended up in the middle of, they might end up at Arthur Lismer's bio. And from there they could say, oh, he's part of a group of other artists. And then from there they could look at other artists that are part of that group. You can move through in any direction. It's just the idea that there are all these connections available, but it's not necessarily a structured path that someone has to take. We are also very aware that we have a large professional audience that uses Artefacts Canada. And one of the things that we've heard many times over the years was that the community really valued Artefacts Canada, but that it was outdated, and please update it. And one of the things definitely in need of updating was the search. So we added on a taxonomy to help with some faceted searching, and we also added in AAT terms. And so that helps people explore, because this is where you get into the thing with vocabulary not being applied consistency across records, but in this case we can try to apply these vocabularies to assist with searching. Volumetrics, mainly for data geeks, but this was also to get an idea of how this technology could scale up, because, okay, so we did 76,000 records, and what that turned into was over 4 million RDF statements, and we were able to get the application to act quickly, and we have to bear in mind that when you start talking about 4 million records, that's going to be really large scale. Technical lessons learned. One of the things we discovered quite quickly is that the complex type of searches that we wanted to do, which were considered really important, we're not going to be able to do just with a Sparkle triple store. So then we ended up adding another layer onto the search, and that definitely improved our search process. Now we go back to the ideal picture, which would be that idea of not a centralized database, but Artefacts Canada just being one node with many linked open data nodes out there. And also that we would not be having institutions contribute data, but they would be harvesting it or getting it from them in Lido, and they could be providing RDF. However, most museums can't publish their own LOD, and we definitely have a lot of museums that will never be able to do anything other than send us data records. I did a recent survey with Canadian museums about the status of their collections management, and a lot of them are still using Excel or FileMaker or something like that, so they're never going to be able to produce, Lido or anything like that, and producing LOD for us would be definitely beyond them. So even as we move forward and hope for some museums to create their own LOD, the reality is we're going to have a multiple structured model. We did find some benefits, though, that we can probably get rid of the old data dictionary step. I would also say that I lost my train of thought. It's late in the day, in the week, and I just lost my train of thought on that. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. I'm talking about this as LOD, but it is not open yet. We have a long process of educating our Canadian museums about what exactly that would mean to be open, and how we can educate and work with them in order to actually have an open data model. So at the moment, we're a linked data model. But for now, we want to build on the foundation, solidifying the work that we've already done. We obviously need to move beyond just art for data, because we have any kind of humanities data types in Artefacts Canada. We will continue to put in more records, though, and for now we'll have to maintain the original Artefacts Canada just because the records are there and they need to be still available. Longer term, we know we need to improve the functionalities of the interface. We would definitely want to be able to provide metrics to the museums, need to scale up more, need to work on data cleanup, definitely need to find tools to do some of this work. This was a fairly manual process, which you can't do when there are 4 million records. Eventually decommission the old AC and created a better process for getting the museum's data. Other things we're working on right now, we are looking at hosting nomenclature online, which will be valuable for the museum community that uses that. That work and negotiation is underway. There was this collections management survey in the Canadian museum community. I'm doing some analysis on that right now. In the next year, we'll be doing not a full collections management software review, which is one of the things Chin used to be known for, but definitely looking at updating our tools to help museums choose collections management systems. And then the big project, modernizing Artefacts Canada. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're doing. The URL is up there for now. Oh, look at that. And now we'll just turn it over to Fiona.
All right. Let's see if I can do this. All right. So while we're waiting, if you can hear me, or is it up? Yeah, okay. So thanks everybody for taking the elevator to the 8th floor. I know it's kind of tricky. And a shout out to our AV guy, Andrew, in the back there. Thanks for setting us up. So I'm going to follow on from Sheila's presentation with a look at how we're creating an open innovation environment at the Canada Science and Technology Museums. I'm going to focus mainly on our OpenHeritage portal. It's a portal where our working documents are, where our working documents are accessible online in real time, and they are open by default. In the past 6 months, we've moved from a traditional closed by default environment to one that is actually open by default. So talk about navigating some choppy water there. How do we do this? Sorry. So I'll just tell you a little bit about us. We're 3 national museums in Canada. We're the Canada Agriculture and Food Museum, the Canada Aviation and Space Museum, and the Canada Science and Technology Museum. And you can see our mandate up there. It's to foster scientific and technological literacy throughout Canada. So I'm doing this left-handed. So here's a snapshot of who we are. We've got a lot of artifacts, a lot of archival material. We reach out to, we've had, oh, that's okay, 500,000 visitors, and that was with one of our museums closed for renovations. We have a farm in the middle of the city in Ottawa. We also have an active runway. So that's a pretty cool place. So delivering on our mandate, engagement is central to our vision. This won't be a surprise to anybody in this room, that's an important way for us to reach out to people. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. And what we do know is that the traditional stewardship of knowledge is breaking down, and delivering on our mandate and engaging with our visitors is really important. And it also means that there's a change in expectations. So people do expect to participate and engage with us. We know we're living in the world where we've got Uber, we've got Airbnb. It's not news. This leads me. Sorry. Just use that. Okay. Thank you. So digital citizenship means that we have to work with the world around us. People want to engage with us. We want to engage with people. We want to be good digital citizens as well. We want people working with our stuff. We've used World War I diaries in our archives collection as the basis for a World War I game, and we worked in a partner with this. We want to share authority, as you can see. So what does our participation look like? We were the first national museum to release our collection data as open data, and we've engaged in national hackathons. We've crowdsourced a digital storybook about the 150th anniversary for Canada. That's getting stories from people in other government departments, universities, communities, and they're all sending in stories about innovation. We've got our library, artifact, and archival records online, and we were also the first national museum to put exhibitions on Google Cultural Institute. So Our project, our OpenHeritage project, as Sheila was saying, is embedded in the Government of Canada's agenda for openness and transparency. They have sort of three prongs to this, or three sections that it supports. Open data is one of them. There's also open information, which is one-stop access to published information, which is a little different from what we're doing. We've got some published information on our portal, but we've also got draft documents up there, IPs, and so on, things that you wouldn't normally see on a museum's web portal. Oops. So our suite of open initiatives right now, so our information is living in an increasingly open environment. So I mentioned earlier the open data, which we did in the fall of 2014. Library catalog has been up for years. Collection online, we put up a beta version last spring. This spring we released OpenHeritage. We did it as a pilot project, experimental pilot project. We did it in a month, and we launched it February 29th with 100 documents. Now we've got quite a few more than that. And Open Archives is a connection to our archival assets. So here's some screenshots of our bicycle exhibition, the Google Cultural Institute, and also our Innovation digital storybook. So we see OpenHeritage as a way of tackling digital citizenship, of us being good digital citizens and engaging with people. We also see it as radical transparency. So everything is going up unless it's private or personal information, or if it's sensitive information. So we've tried to embed it into people's work so that as you're working, we have a document management system. So as people are working on their interpretive plans, on their exhibition plans, on their historical assessments and so on, they're going up live. It updates every 2 to 3 hours. The public only sees the latest version. So if you're working on something and you save it, that is what goes up, not the earlier version, the one with all the errors perhaps. So it's quite a change for staff. So this is a screenshot of what it looks like. Sheila was talking earlier about design and so on. I would be the first person to admit that the design is perhaps not the most beautiful, but that's the front page. This is when you get into it, you can see that you can browse by function or by search or subject area. We're realizing that some of the words that we used don't resonate with everybody. They're pretty clear to us, but then we know we've got to do more testing. Function, as I said, doesn't make sense to everybody. And also some of these subject areas are not completely clear to people. There's subject areas that we collect in, so we base this pretty much around the collection, but we've got to do some changes there. So our vision is obviously to be part of Government of Canada's agenda for openness and transparency, to advance the field, to get other people looking at this type of transparency. It is really unusual to give this type of access to your working documents. Imagine, working on something that you feel very close to and you're not ready to share yet. We are throwing the doors open, saying, "Yeah, you know a lot. You've got a lot of knowledge, and let's get it out there and let's have people looking at it as well, and maybe using it." So, strategy is to share authority, to have partnerships, national, international partnerships. And again, staff are a big part of this, getting staff thinking about their work differently, not just internally, because people are used to sort of thinking in siloed terms. If I'm in education, I'm doing a program for the floor. If I'm in curatorial, I'm doing my research on artifacts. And this way, people are starting to look internally across across these areas, and also looking externally. So we did user stories as part of this project to see who we could, like if it made sense to do even. We found that that researchers were super keen on this type of asset, this type of portal. We spoke to professors, we spoke to students, we spoke to librarians, and they were over the moon happy to think that this type of research was going to be accessible. People were wishing that they'd seen it earlier, which is too bad. Just didn't know it existed. We also looked at Curious Canadian, as our CEO says, Canadians dig their history. We have a lot of enthusiasts who know a lot more about different parts of our collection than we do. So reaching out to them, making this content accessible and saying, well, what do you have? Or what do you think when we're doing historical assessments of a topic? Motor cars in Canada in the 1950s, reaching out to people who are also authorities in that area. Again, teachers are always looking for material, as are students. Exhibition planners. So, we see, we've had questions in the past where you did an exhibition on Braille. What artifacts did you use in that exhibition? Can we have a look at the programming you did around that exhibition? What was your IP? What was your big idea for that? We don't want to do the same thing, but we would mind riffing off what you've already done. Did you do any evaluation around the exhibition? Those types of documents are going onto the portal. And then authors. So these are a few of our user stories. There were others as well. So how do we do it? Again, we're embedded in the Government of Canada's open information initiatives. We did leverage technologies that we already had. So we had a document management system, and we used that. So we got people learning how to manage their content, which we're still working on. And used our website. We did a lot of consultations, as you've heard. We did a threat risk assessment. A lot of people were really worried about private and sensitive information being shared. That was a big issue. So we did a lot of training and a lot of safeguards around preventing the release of that type of content. We measured our success with a dashboard right off the top, which has been good. For us, it was important to measure how the portal was being used, how many documents were being downloaded. We measured them against how many were added, so we know that pretty much every month the number was doubling. And we were also trying to measure how people were using the internal system to make sure that people didn't stop using the document management system, the electronic documents management system. And then, of course, part of it is building on and expanding our network of partners. So where we are, we're the first, as far as we know, open by default public service institution. Our staff on train is ongoing, and we're wanting to share, or we are sharing, what we're doing, why we're doing it, how it works. So we're going around to different groups and talking to them. We've essentially lowered our walls internally, externally. We're a little bit more agile, relying on more partnerships. We're reaching out to people to use the content. We've got stories about colleagues going back to their institutions and encouraging staff to share their documents, get rid of shared network drives. I don't know if anyone here is using shared network drives, but yeah, see. Ours are now all shut down. We don't use shared network drives at all anymore. We have researchers using the portal, and also we've made the document management system more useful to staff. So, sorry. Okay, so in the short term, what we're doing, I won't go through this in gory detail, but we're encouraging people. We're doing more testing of the portal. I mentioned earlier about some of the terminology that we used. We know we need to fix that. You know, when we're adding more than one subject area, you know, that ends up with sort of funny diacritics on the site. We've created business rules. We're looking into policies around open data sets and open content. So we need a whole open policy suite. We're looking at the metadata that people are using, so we're probably going to get more advanced with that. It's pretty simple right now, so we just want to punch that up a bit. And also get people thinking about the work that they do and the fact that their work has value outside of what they're thinking of it being applicable for. So we are going to continue engaging with stakeholders. In the long term, we will have a collaboration tool for employees only, sooner rather than later, please. We've talked about doing open by default for email, which is kind of a scary concept, yes. So we're still looking at that and what the implications for that are, because of course there's a lot of email addresses, and Sheila's horrified at the thought, as are all my colleagues. Yeah. But one of the interesting things too is, like, we're going forward looking at machine learning and, you know, what we can do with this content, how we can link some of this content to other museums. So looking at partnerships and looking at ways of using it in a bigger scale. So it's small right now, but I mean, I think it's a way forward. And if you start thinking about the type of work you do, and if you could just go to some other museums and say, how are they doing it? I think it's a great start. So I think that's my last. So yes, so in conclusion, my big conclusion is that it was disruptive, it will be disruptive. It's kind of choppy water at times, but I think it's been really valuable, and I think it's really been great for staff to, you know, see that their content has value outside its own space. So, thank you. Oh. And that's me. So feedback on the site is very welcome, because I say it is a pilot. Go look at it if you have comments about it, you have suggestions. You can get back to me directly, or there's also contact information on the site. So, thank you. Big crowd.
Yeah. So any questions?
Any questions? Yeah.
With your the open documents and potentially going to email, that your Canadian government, that the person you may be communicating with isn't Canadian government.
Right.
Is there going to be a warning to the other party, or how
Yeah.
is that to be?
So, like I said, a lot of investigation will occur before that even happens, and it might be only emails around a certain topic, or, but yes, no, you would never release emails without the person we're communicating with knowing. That would be, I'm thinking suicide. That would be really tacky, because, you know, that would be bad.
We have a
No.
privacy commissioner that would be all over that.
Yeah, so that wouldn't happen. I mean, no.
Anything else?
I have a question for Sheila.
Sure.
What sort of triple store are you using for your database?
Oh, I was hoping I wouldn't get asked one of those questions, because I didn't do the technology for that. I could definitely, because we do have technical documents on it, if you give me your card, I could send you the technical document with which ones they looked into and why they didn't choose certain ones, because I was the coordinator and I didn't do that. But yeah, if you shoot me your card, I'll follow up for you.
And if it was an OpenHeritage, you could just go to the site. And you'd get it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sheila, I had to tease.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Now, nobody wants to ask me a technical question anyway. They'll just be told to give me their card. Okay. Well, thank you. I know it's...
Thank you very much for coming. Thanks.
Thank you.